Tuesdays at 3 p.m. I'm also doing a live thing at Twitter today. And of course, there's Rockfin and Getter and Rumble, of course, is the flagship station, and all the usual suspects are with us. I can also take a live call at 617 396 4958. 617 396 4958. So, Michael, the obviously Super Tuesday was historic. I don't think any candidate in history has done as well as President Trump did. I mean, he totally cleaned the clock. It's interesting that the one state that he didn't take, Vermont, that's being played up, but the mayor of Burlington, Vermont, apparently came out with a public statement in advance saying, join the Republican Party for one day and vote for Nikki as a way to stop Trump. And it actually seemed to have worked. It's the only city in that state. And so she was able to eke out a tiny victory there. But
But
other than that,
it was a Pyrrhic victory, right? Because exit interviews showed that they were all not only Democrats, but Trump hating Democrats that voted for her. So it was a total joke.
Oh yeah, no, it was crazy. Yeah, I mean, ridiculous. And the fact is that Biden, of course, had no opposition. They did the same thing to RFK Jr. that they did to Bernie Sanders back in I think 2016, when he won the New Hampshire primary pretty handily, but he got 0 delegates. All of them went to Hillary. It was very strange. So that's how the Democrats play, and they just decided that Biden can't handle any opposition. They have to just put him in there. And so he obviously won because he had no opposition. And even then, he had all of the anti-Semites voting no contest because they want to support Hamas, which I think is ironic and interesting, given the fact that Trump would probably be a much more staunch supporter of the state of Israel if he wins. But so he's kind of getting it from both sides on that one. I mean, I actually feel a little badly because he has been a supporter of Israel, to his credit. But now we have a situation where the media is saying, and this one is really rich. Well, 30% of the people of these states voted against Trump. He has a big problem, right? Well, 40% voted against him. Never mind that 60 or 70 voted for him, but somehow because he didn't get, I mean, it's absurd, and it's obviously way out there, and it's desperate. But look, I mean, we can celebrate, and I do, but it's going to be a tough gig. I mean, they're not going to go down lightly. And I would note, like, for example, Mark Elias, who I follow on Twitter and who's a truth teller, and who was one of the primary architects of the 2020 steal. He is a brilliant lawyer, and he's a tough nut. I mean, he's going after each state by state, trying to preserve and advance the voter fraud technology. And I'm going to read one of his posts. He says, and this was yesterday, and he spoke about this on MSNBC, State of the Union, with that woman. She looks like a chipmunk. I forget her name. Nicole Wallace. Every state controlled by the Democrats needs to immediately repeal laws allowing for voter challenges. No voter should be disenfranchised because a right-wing activist who they have never met challenges their right to vote. Now, this, yeah, I mean, what he's really saying here is you're not going to be able to challenge a state delegation once the vote is in. And so if they put in enough fake votes, too bad. They want to get state legislators in the blue states to put in laws that would prevent challenges. Of course, it's a classic leftist play in that it has a double meaning, a double attack. On the one hand, they're going to try to codify their right to steal an election by not allowing anyone to challenge that election. On the other hand, they're able to attack conservatives or anybody that doesn't genuflect to their point of view by implying that somehow it's conservatives who would question someone's legitimate registered vote, which is, of course, a lie.
Gee,
No
does
one is.
this remind you of the communists caused the Reichstag on fire? Is that sort of the mentality here?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, and it sort of creates an atmosphere of that. And look, obviously, no one is challenging a legitimate vote anytime. If someone's registered to vote in a state and they pass their vote, no one is challenging that. That's a good thing. What they're challenging is the fake votes, the votes that involve papering the House with who knows how many umpteen hundreds of thousands of ballots under the auspices of being quote absentee, and then stuffing the boxes with those ballots, which there's so many videos of that going on that it's ridiculous. And other, perhaps a computer manipulation where you have computers, configured in advance to, use algorithms to make sure that a vote only reaches a certain level. It works sort of like the stock market. If a vote goes up to a certain point, everything shuts down, and other manipulations, which is something that is now coming out in Fulton County, Georgia, according to the testimony of former Judge Gableman, or former Judge Haldeman, and his
Right.
report. Gableman actually is another judge in Wisconsin who's come out with a similar report about the electronic voting, which my own Senator Elizabeth Warren back in 2019 said was quote rigged unquote, and who issued a piece of legislation calling for an end of all electronic voting in all 50 states. Of course, she doesn't do that now, but the point I'm making here is that Elias, who is a brilliant lawyer and who has a team of people who are going to back him up, he is pressuring the states to pass these laws, the state legislators in left-wing states. So I bring this up because this is the only way they can win, and they mean business. They're going to try to rig the elections. I think we need to revisit and reread Molly Ball's article in Time magazine, which was published in February, the February following the election and after Biden was installed, where she basically blows the whistle on the entire agenda. And Mark Elias is one of the major players in that article. I mean, he's one of the lawyers who came up with a lot of these schemes. And I think the other people like Lawrence Tribe and Dick Gephardt apparently was involved, and Weissman, and just a group, a real rogues gallery of high-powered legal minds who figured it out in intricate detail how to steal an election. So, Mike, what do you think is coming down the pike in terms of all this?
Well, I noticed that, and also that they're coming up with plans, if Trump wins, to not certify the election. But I think the silver lining here is that they're showing all their cards. And
Not certify the election? That
Yeah.
sounds like an insurrection to me.
yeah, well, that observation was made by others. But I have to stop and think, why are they doing this? Okay. I mean, suppose,
Because they're all going to go to jail. That's why.
yeah, right. I mean,
If Trump
suppose
wins.
you were a booster for a high school sports team. At what point do you cross the line to cheat in whatever way possible for your team to win? So, when they've crossed the line to becoming criminals, which they have. And by the way, you mentioned Dick Gephardt. What a way to end his career. Turning into a damn thug just before he died. I'm not sure what happens to these people. But I think one thing you didn't mention, maybe because you're too nice, of all this stupid media spin on Trump's success, there were a number of articles to the effect that, look at Nikki Haley, she did a great job. She hung in there. Well, you know what? If you have people stupid enough to bankroll you to the tune of over $100 million to keep losing, I mean, why not stay in?
Of course, anybody would stay in. I mean, you got the
So,
money.
so
You don't want to shut off the roll. And I think it's what when the Koch brothers pulled out is why she dropped out.
well, the other thing is, didn't she kind of realize that if most of her money was coming from people like Reid Hoffman, who are hardcore
Yes, of
Democrats,
LinkedIn. Yeah.
uh, what's the game plan here? So you win and you become the quote Republican president, and you have this sword of Damocles over your head with all these left wing donors. How's that going to work? So
Well,
she's
she's
despicable.
of course, but the thing is, she's also a classic left-leaning rhino. What they used to call a Rockefeller Republican. She's
Oh,
into like perpetual war for perpetual peace
that's
and
it.
big government and world order, and there's not a lot of morality there. It's all like the Bushes, and I mean, going way back to Wendell Willkie. Actually, I mean, it's these
It was
Republicans.
probably the first. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. For the Our One World was the title of his book.
Well,
I
Wendell
mean,
Willkie was such a great Republican that Franklin Roosevelt asked him to be part of his administration.
sure.
So
I mean, he might as well have been.
do
I
the
mean,
math.
yeah. I mean, the whole thing was phony. But the point is that that's where Haley is coming from. So she doesn't mind taking their money because she's one of them. I mean, she's in sync with them. They won't need to control her. She's already in. She would be
Yeah.
in with them, and she actually had the nerve not only you know, to kind of very ungraciously not endorse Trump as the nominee, like you would expect most Republicans to do, but say that he had to earn with support from these rhinos. He has to like basically bow. If he bows down enough, they'll support him. Now, that's actually a little troubling because I wonder
A
if
little.
yeah, a little is right. I mean, will some of those people actually vote for Biden?
Well, that's a very good question. I mean, uh, that's the term, Republicans in name only.
Yeah.
Uh,
Of course,
as you
Trump
say,
won last time around without them. I mean, they were just as virile. Remember Mitt Romney? I mean, delivering a
uh,
speech in 2016. Oh, I mean, so dripping with rage and so, I mean, I think in the case of Mitt Romney, and I'm saying this as someone who met him a few times when he was my governor here in Massachusetts, I think that he's just bitter and I think he's jealous and he's sour grapes. He blew it against Obama, an election he should have won. And, a lot of people, I supported him at the time. I mean, a lot of people did, but he just didn't have the guts that Trump has. He didn't know how to really take off the gloves and do the work that needed to be done. I mean, he thought that he could be like the classic Massachusetts WASP Republican, if I may, like Bill Weld and Saltonstall and the Cabots,
yeah.
where they're very nice and they come across as very, they talk like they got a mouthful of marbles, and then and they have someone behind them, with a knife, but they never go, they're just nothing. It's kind of like I don't know. It makes me think also of the Godfather movies. They show the Godfather, Michael Corleone, and the family that they're very into Catholic ritual, and they show them in the church with the incense and the priest, and then they flash to a scene where they're like, and then they go back to the church. That's Massachusetts politics, and that's Yankee politics, and that's what Nikki Haley's about. That's what all those people are about. Romney, all of them. Trump, on the other hand, Trump is a New York, Queens in particular,
Yeah.
kind of a guy. He fights his battles up front. He doesn't use these sort of, sophistries and these artifices. He'll do the knifing himself, right in the front of right on the street, which is so much more refreshing. I mean, at least we know, what the enemy is and who and why. And so I think that I don't know. I mean, I mean, I guess the point I'm making here is that the same rotten, amoral, illuminated, left-leaning Republican establishment did, Trump beat them anyway in 2016. Can he beat them again?
I think so because this what movement that I call the lace curtain Republicans,
Yeah.
and the latest example of that was Marjorie Taylor Greene. You may have seen the clip. Was being interviewed by someone, I believe, from the BBC,
Yes.
who was completely obnoxious and asking these horrible questions. And 2 or 3 minutes into it, Green finally told her to F off. Right?
Yeah.
And
I know, it's great.
okay, here was the good part. So if you read the comments after the video, 90% or more were, yeah, way to go, take off the gloves. But there were the predictable 10%. We needn't resort to profanity and, the same stupid
Mhm.
lace curtain, feminized, if you will, type approach, this patrician, or might I say fake patrician approach, so well represented by your friend Nelson Rockefeller. And you know how he ended up, right? And that was the whole amoral thing. And boy, did karma bite him in
Exactly. Yeah, and that's exactly what's going on with most of these people. Anyways,
yeah,
when you get somebody that's so like high and mighty. I mean,
yeah,
I think of the governor of Virginia, Northrop. Was it Northam?
Northam.
Northam, right? He was going to lead the charge as a Southerner against Trump. We're going to good and evil. Then he gives an interview on NPR where he talks about how, as an abortion doctor and a pediatrician, he would leave the baby to die.
Yeah.
And even the two women hosts, you can see it on video, left wing, probably pro abortion, they looked uncomfortable. I mean, they were like, oh my God. I mean, so the point is, we now find out that his great moral crusade was not exactly founded in any reality.
No, there is no morality. And it's funny you mentioned that story because
Yeah.
I guess it was sort of like people like hamburgers, but don't like, seeing the cow get killed, sort of thing. And it's one thing to be theoretically in favor of abortion, but to be there and what he was advocating, and
Was
apparently
murder.
he'd been in situations where the newborn baby was put on a counter and left to die. I don't
Exactly.
think that's the guy that I would want to be a leader. And I keep using this example because there is no other example.
Well, of course, that's one of the main tenets of the what the Democratic Party now offers. They normalize that along with turning little boys into girls and little girls into boys through surgeries and open borders and Hamas. I mean, what else do they stand for? What else are they offering? Hey, McDonald's hamburgers cost $15 for a family to go to. You have
Yeah.
a family of a father, mother, and 3 kids. $75 to go to
Oh, yeah.
McDonald's,
Yeah.
right? And this is what they're offering the American people. I mean, what else are they? What else do they have to offer? What are they offering Black people in this country other than more Kristallnachts like they pulled off after the George Floyd death, where they have gangs of terrorists go in and loot businesses and burn neighborhoods and slaughter children? I mean, really, what are they offering them? And also, of
Well,
course,
they're
abortion,
not
easy
offering that,
abortion.
and that's the key point. This observation has been made by others, but it bears repeating. The Democrats at some point changed because it's easier to being the party essentially of virtue signaling. In other words, their main people are the upper class, all right, where you can sit and sip your martini and be in favor of all this stuff, although you yourself would never do it. I
Right.
mean, that's the beauty of it. Okay. All these people on the Upper East Side, or whatever cliche you want to use, who are these supporters, are in theory in favor of all these things, But then you look at how does this become a platform anyway? What does abortion have to do with being pro-Hamas? What does that have to do with being pro-transgender?
Right.
What does that have to do with
With
breaking
being
down the education
and,
system?
and by the way, with being queer, how many queers are walking around Gaza, right? I mean,
Yeah,
I see these signs, queers for Gaza. Really?
yeah,
Anyway,
go there. Yeah,
but Mike, tonight, of course, is the State of the Union address. And personally, I can't stand watching Biden because he just is obviously in a mid stage of dementia, and it's painful that they put this man up there. I mean, I think they probably pump him up with amphetamines. He's probably spending the day, I would hope, for his own sake, sleeping and getting a massage or something, or just getting himself ready, because all he has to do is look somewhat compos mentis and stand there and read off of a teleprompter, and yet he can barely do that. It's
well, I
sad.
guess I guess I'm not as good of a person as you because I have long lost any sympathy for this man.
Right.
Right,
Well, yeah, I mean, he's
and
just sheer ambition.
the fact that he's being propped up, I mean, it's too bad. But and
No, I know, and he has no business being there. And his wife walks him around by the elbow and whispers in his ear, and it's like he looks like he's to be blunt, it's like he's pooped himself, and he's like shuffling. It's sickening. It's a horrible spectacle, especially in a world that's so unstable right now, where you have a feeling around the world that we're on the verge of a world war. You've got they're flying 350,000 people, not over the border, but into airports at night,
yeah,
so that the visuals
which they've
wouldn't be there.
admitted to, so it's probably more than that.
And there's no rational explanation for that. I mean, they're here. I mean, I've seen them in Boston. As I mentioned in a past show, I saw them at a hotel in Concord, which is a nice suburb of Boston. And these are people who they're 90% of them are young men. They're not poor. They look well fed, well dressed. They're living in a nice hotel. They seem to have nice cars in the parking lot. And most of them seem like they're probably from the Middle East or from Africa. They're not Hispanics. And for some inexplicable reason, this government is bringing them in here by the tens of thousands,
Well, what they
if
want
not
to do
millions.
is create a permanent Democrat voter base. And again, I spend too much time on these various websites and read comments. So when this was proffered by a number of people, the comment was, "Well, that's ridiculous. You know that you have to be a citizen to vote." And I'm thinking, you dumbass. When was the last time your citizenship was ever checked when you went
That's
to
right.
the
Look, I just voted in the primary. They didn't ask me anything. They asked my address. That's
yeah.
it. And I mean, look, I think there's obvious resentment because it's breaking the back of this state, Massachusetts, financially. I mean, the Boston Globe just did an article where they noted that the state has signed a $10 million contract with this fancy Italian caterer to
Yeah.
feed them 3 meals a day. And it
Well, where
showed
does
the
Maura
estimate.
stand on this? Maura, baby. What's her
Maura
opinion?
Healey,
Yeah.
she's actually complaining about it, but she's like doing it with, the government needs to come in and spend more money, not the state. But the point is that they get $17 for breakfast,
Yeah.
about $15 for lunch, and $30 for dinner 7 days a week with this
Right.
fancy Italian caterer with probably really good food. I don't know. I mean, I spend less than that in a week on like going out and having food. I mean, it's just, I mean, and meanwhile, you get a poor working lower class family, low middle income family, they have to spend more than that in a day out of their own pocket. I mean, this is given to them. It's insane.
Well, I think that this is only going to hurt the left because this isn't the 1950s. You can't keep this stuff quiet.
Right.
Everybody knows that it's
Especially
over.
with Trump. Because Trump
And
has no problem laying it out there, and he's doing it very well. He seems much more disciplined. He looks good. He looks strong. He's his tweets are much more coherent. They're a little bit less off the. He tends to go off the reservation sometimes
yeah,
on trivia and stupid stuff. He seems much more disciplined. Maybe he has some people helping him and managing him, and he's got good people around him. He's got like Miller, what's his name?
Stephen Miller.
Stephen Miller has he's put together a legal firm to go after violations of law. I mean, he's responding to the lawfare, and Steve Bannon and a lot of other good people, and Rick Grinnell. These are solid people. I mean, Kash Patel is another one. I mean, it would be exciting to have them back in there. We need to have like a Secretary of State who's not going to be like a noodle like Blinken. Maybe bring back you know who is it? I don't know who he had there, but I forget his last name. But
Yeah, I
I mean,
don't know who you're referring to,
but the point is that there are some very good, talented people. I'd love to see him put Giuliani in as
yeah.
Attorney
Well, I
General.
mean, the other thing that's happening that people don't talk about.
Mike Pompeo. Anyway, yeah.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
He had some poor advisors around him in the first term,
He did.
and I keep harping on the daughter and son-in-law, who I could never stand.
I understand.
And I have no way of proving this, but I bet that at least 3/4 of his bad decisions were from them.
Right. Well, I disagree with you on that. I think that they're brilliant. I know that they're a little bit on the liberal side, but I heard Jared Kushner and by the way, John Jr. is great. You should put him in there.
Yeah.
But I heard Kushner interviewed by I think it was Lex Friedman, who does a really good podcast. And he talked about, I mean, his area of interest is the Middle East and foreign policy generally. And he had a lot to do with the Abraham Accords. He created a plan that would have, had Trump been reelected, I think, led to the creation of a Palestinian entity, a state of some sort that would have been demilitarized because they would have operated from a position of strength and they would have brought both sides together, even though neither side would have wanted to do it, and they would have made it happen because that's how Trump operates. And he actually is quite brilliant in that area.
I was referring more to domestic stuff.
Right. I don't know if he wants to poke his nose into that one because, yeah, I mean, I think that, I mean, even though, I mean, I think that Ivanka got Trump. I know that it's probably not popular with conventional conservatives, but she got him to sign an executive order for the executive branch, offering a 6-week leave of absence for childcare, if you both male or female, if you're the primary care person for the newborn or the newly acquired baby, which I think is good.
No, I'm not saying it was all bad, but if you look
Right.
at stuff like bringing in Chris Wray.
Oh, that, I mean, you know who was behind that? I think the person behind that was Chris Christie.
Yeah.
He had some very bad people around him. I mean, you're right.
Yeah.
I mean,
so all I'm saying, we don't have to go deeper, is he doesn't seem to have those people around him anymore.
Yeah, he had some pretty rotten people. There was also that military man, I forget his name, who was very bad. It was a Colonel
McMaster.
And some of these people were, I mean, SB was another one.
Yeah.
They were, and certainly the one, the cyber guy, Krebs, very bad people.
Well, these were highly credentialed swamp creatures, and I think maybe Trump's biggest mistake was thinking, look, I'm this badass New York guy. No one's going to put anything over on me. But then he gets into this horrible swamp thing.
Yeah.
And he got an education into how absolutely despicable people are. Because I'll tell you that in the world of construction in New York, it may be a little rough and tumble, but I don't think anybody in that industry is going to be like Vicki Newland, who's willing to sacrifice hundreds of
Oh my
thousands of
God, yeah.
lives to this absurd Ukraine war. So it's just a whole new level.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I hope that Trump has learned something from that. I mean, Gina Haspel was another one. Totally was part of the
Yeah,
rotten conspiracy theory that Putin colluded with Trump or
right.
conspired with Trump to steal the 2016 election. I mean, and then the perfect phone call impeachment. These things were really rotten. They were conspiracies against Trump, and they were conspiracies by promoting false conspiracy theories and then having the media tout those. And some of those same rotten people are still around. You still got Adam Schiff. He should have been driven out of Congress. I mean, he walked around for 3 years getting his fat face on television night after night saying, I have in my hip pocket information showing that Putin conspired with Trump to steal the election. He's never
Yeah.
delivered it. Now he's running for Senate, and I understand in California that he might not make it. This guy running against him is very popular, Republican. I think he's a former football team
And
owner or something.
baseball player, Steve Garb.
Baseball. Yeah. So, I mean, that would be a huge win if they can get rid of that
Well,
skunk.
Schiff may be over thinking this. He was in one of these 110% Democrat districts in California. He was in Burbank, part of Hollywood. It was like the same Henry Waxman sort of thing, that it was always Democrat. You had and I knew Henry personally. You had a guy who was less than unimpressive, all right?
Right.
But he kept getting elected, kept getting elected. Same thing with Schiff. It tended to happen in a lot of these districts that people would be in forever.
Yeah, of
But
course.
he does not have statewide appeal. And he was running against some pretty weak competition in the primary.
He doesn't
Uh,
even live in California. He lives in Maryland. He goes to California a couple of times a year.
yeah. Well,
And
that's
that's
the other
covered.
problem with these career guys. Uh, exactly. But I think Garvey will give him some competition.
Yeah.
I think there may be some surprises because the Democrats.
I think there'll be more than some surprises if they can overcome the corruption. And then I think that the Republicans are going to take back the Senate. You've got Sinema leaving, and Kerry Lake is very strong there. You've got, even in New Jersey, you've got, what's his face? In more indictments, more corruption, more gold bars.
Menendez.
Menendez, he's going to probably be out.
But look at how long he survived under a cloud.
Yeah.
What, 15 years? 20 years?
He's a liberal Dem.
Yeah, it's just massively. Well, the other story that's funny is, and maybe you saw this.
He's got
Some
Dem privilege.
some undersecretary of the VA who's had a dismal career in the agency. Dismal. Among other things, she took the worst VA hospital in the system. There's 123 hospitals in the system, and the dead last worst hospital is Phoenix.
Mm-hmm.
She was there for a few years, made it even worse. But since no one gets fired from the government, she was transferred to a VA hospital in the Philippines, then somehow landed on her feet back in this undersecretary position. And of course, she's the one that decided that the VJ Day picture of the sailor with the nurse should be taken down, which was so awful, and there's so much of an outcry that the secretary of the VA said no, which is good, but he should have also kicked her butt out of there. I mean, I think people are beginning to see just how bad it is, whether it's Fannie Willis.
Oh yes, yeah. I mean, that's
of course
let that one run along for a while longer, because that's a shipwreck. That's, they had everything staked on her phony case, RICO of all things. because Trump dared to question that corrupt election. All of a
Yeah.
sudden, that's a crime. I mean, that's what I mean. All of those cases are falling apart. I mean, you had that really rotten case with that woman claiming that Trump had attacked her at Bergdorf Goodman. What a lie! That would never have made a courtroom if it wasn't Trump. She couldn't even remember the year. The likelihood of that, really? Trump is one of the most famous men in New York. Everyone recognizes him on the street. And he's going to go into Bergdorf Goodman, which, by the way, Giuliani explained this. You go into a store like that, even if you're a nobody, and you get people coming around, oh, can I help you? Can I serve you? Can I show you?
Right.
But for somebody like Trump, who is very famous and recognizable, and then he's going to attack this woman in the dressing room. I mean, not to mention the fact that she had made accusations against other wealthy men, including Les Moonves from
Yeah.
CBS, and that she was a rape fantasist and columnist in a newspaper. I mean, we're talking about, obviously she did the same thing a lot of people did during the Trump years, and they realized that attacking Trump can be pretty lucrative. You can make a few bucks. Even Trump's sister, even Trump's niece, Mary Trump, she made a fortune attacking Trump. And basically because she had a chip on her shoulder because the grandfather was not right to her father, who passed away. He was an alcoholic and Trump's older brother. And so she was bitter. I get that. So she took it out on Trump and his brothers and sisters. But she could see that attacking Trump was, she had like a $10 million advance for that book.
Yeah.
She was the darling of the left-wing media. Rachel Maddow was there practically swooning and putting her up there. Oh, night after night, who wouldn't do it? I'd probably have done it. I mean, it's sort of like hard to resist. So, it's an industry that you can make. Even Trump's former, I think it was Melania's former press agent, this woman Grisham, she did a really low and dastardly attack.
Oh,
She made,
yeah.
yeah, right. I mean, she made a few bucks from that book. That's just a matter of money. I mean, people get hooked on not just the money, but getting to see their fat face on television, right? I
Well,
mean that.
the best part is that the ones that jumped off the Trump train, like Jenna Ellis, are not trying to come back on.
Well, I actually feel bad for her. She was scared. They were going to put her in prison. She's a no. I give her a big break. She was one of Trump's lawyers who questioned the election in Georgia. She was indicted. She was threatened. God knows what they would have done. I mean, you take a look at these poor guys from the protest of January 6th. I mean, they've been sent up the river for years, and in many cases, not even facing charges. I mean, so I think that she was frightened. I give her a break. You know, she uh, it's like being in Hanoi Hilton. They bring her out and they make her confess in public. I mean, they're doing that to the prisoners in the DC Gulag, and according to Jake Lang, who's done some interviews from prison and who now, by the way, has disappeared. He has said that if they're willing to step forward and testify against Trump, they get everything. Everything is dropped, and they haven't done that. It's incredible. Owen Schroyer, right? He was a reporter, a journalist, standing on the steps near the Capitol, urging people not to go in. He had to go to prison and do solitary confinement for 3 months. And he said that he wouldn't have had to had he stood up publicly and accused Trump or said what they wanted or recanted. Um, Another one that I could mention because I talked to him about it is Dr. Jerome Corsi. He was intimidated, and if you're willing to testify against Trump, the FBI tells him, you will not charge you with anything, but we're going to put you into some hard time unless you do that. And his answer was, look, I'm in my mid 80s. I'm not in the greatest health right now. I am not at this late stage of my life going to lie in order to save my hide. I'll meet my maker. I'd rather go to jail. And, I'm a devout Catholic. I don't care. I'm at peace with God. You do whatever you have to do, but I'm not going to go along. And they dropped the charges because it would have looked terrible if they had really prosecuted that poor man.
Well, I was going to say that too about Jen Ellis, that I can understand how someone gets intimidated, but she was a known entity, unlike some of these January 6th people that no one heard of. So I'm not sure
Okay.
it would have been real pleasant for the FBI to railroad somebody like that. Now, saying that,
Yeah, but did you see her when she did criticize Trump? She was like, it looked like the Hanoi Hilton. She was
yeah,
crying. It was
yeah, it was,
horrible. I mean, that they would do that. And she was someone who had some ambition as a lawyer. She was well respected. She was very good at what she did. And to have her go through that was just
no, it was
the
terrible.
kind of
So,
stuff that they wouldn't do in the Soviet Union wouldn't have pulled this kind of crap.
well, what's going to happen, you suppose, if Trump wins? What's going to happen with the FBI? All right.
He'll
I
fire
believe,
he'll fire Chris Wray on day one
well, that's fine,
and
but the
put
rest of the, I will disagree with
he should
Don
put and he
Hamlin.
should put Sidney Powell in there. I don't know, whatever. I mean, put somebody in there who's going to really kick ass.
Well, all right, but do you think, as I do, that the entire organization is so ruined that you can't fix it?
Yes. No, I think that they're actually, I mean, I think there are some good people in there who, they're playing ball because it's so corrupt that's what's going on. And it's been corrupt since I think it was Obama, or it might have even been Bush, who appointed none other than the infamous Robert Mueller as FBI director. And then after Mueller came his protege, James Comey. And then after Comey came his protege, Chris Wray.
All
None of
right, but
these are
right,
all, none of them had any background in law enforcement. They were all lawyers. They're all political hacks. And it has become very corrupt. But I think that in the rank and file, there are still good people there. Maybe they've kept their head
why?
low.
Why?
I don't
Okay.
know. I don't know that, but I mean,
I
who
mean,
is
we
it?
would like to think that,
Yeah,
but I suggest that if you were an FBI special agent, all right, there are other places you can go. And I can tell you from personal experience, I may have mentioned this on earlier shows. When I was living in Virginia, in fact, had just moved there
yeah,
in 2004, I was in a particular health club, and one of the women at the front desk was married to a special agent. All right.
right.
She didn't know me from a bar of soap. All right. But I couldn't have been there for 3 days when she starts regaling me about how bad the morale is, how corrupt the leadership is, and she doesn't know how her husband's going to stand it. And that was 21 years ago.
Right.
Sorry, 20 years ago. So I don't know that it can be fixed. And I'm telling you, I'm not so sure I'm happy with the idea of having a national police force.
No,
Thank
no,
you
that's
very much.
completely contrary to our constitutional system. The highest law enforcement officer in the land is the county sheriff, and then they're elected. That's the American system. The FBI can maybe, or some agency can provide some data support, perhaps some collect, some general aid over like interstate crime, national crime, maybe investigating genuinely subversive organizations like the Ku Klux Klan or the FBI
But
or
the
the Black
mission has to
Panthers.
be very severely limited.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, back in the day, I mean, even though J. Edgar Hoover was no bowl of cherries, nevertheless, once in a while they would investigate real enemies of the United States. They
Oh,
did,
yeah.
and they did take on the mafia and their national network. They took on the Communist Party and they took on the Ku Klux Klan. They subverted those groups. They went in with special agents. Maybe that's that. I mean, under very careful supervision. Like here in Boston, I could give an example. The
Well, there's some
FBI.
bad examples for Boston too.
Oh,
With
right. I
white
mean,
culture, for heaven's sake.
yeah, very corrupt with corrupt Zip Connolly and all of that. Very
Yeah.
bad. But this was before that, when you had a legitimate FBI. This was before Robert. By the way, Robert Mueller had his fingerprints all over that one too. He was the district attorney. He was the U.S. attorney at the time.
Yeah.
Before that, they took on the Boston mob under Jerry Angiulo, and they did it very successfully under the supervision of a state judge who heard testimony in secret. Judge, what was her name? But it was very, very well done. They would go to the judge, show evidence of why they needed to bug Jerry's, office or whatever they wanted to do. She would look at the evidence and give them a very specific task to do that. And they went through very careful steps to eventually gather enough evidence that they could convict him, and did so. And they really did get that mob off the streets of Boston. It was Boston was really controlled by them for probably decades. And so they played an advisory role. They worked with the local judiciary. They worked with the Boston police. They worked with the mayor of Boston at the time. I think it was Kevin White. And it was a very effective program. I read a book about it years ago. So there can be a role for an FBI using data nationally and using intelligence. And they had somebody on the inside and all of it. And it's a great story. The problem now, of course, is that it's become completely a political tool of the liberal international establishment and the left. I mean, they now are spying on Catholics going to church. They're spying on parents.
Okay, well, let
speaking
me
at
let me
school
stop
board
you right
meetings.
there. Let me stop you right there.
Yeah,
You and Sean Hannity talking about the rank and file.
right.
Chuck, my friend, it's the rank and goddamn file that are the guys out there spying on Catholics.
That's true.
It ain't James Comey, okay?
No, but it's at the direction of Merrick Garland and
Yeah.
Chris Wray. I mean, look, I don't know if it can be reformed. I know, don't they want to build a new office that's bigger than the Pentagon? I mean, I mean, it's very troubling, and that yes, it is going to become like a national police force, very much like what the Gestapo was to the Nazis, the Cheka was to the Soviets, the Stasi was to East Germany. I mean, these are national police forces, not supposed to happen in this country. Barack Obama, when he was running for president, gave a speech. I think it was in Colorado. I don't remember where he openly called for the creation of a national police force.
Yeah.
This is an agenda of the authoritarian left. They want that. They believe in it because they're authoritarians, and that's what's going on. Of course, back then they claimed to be against it because they didn't like the fact that J. Edgar Hoover was investigating the Black Panthers with COINTELPRO. So back then it was like, oh, the authoritarian, fascist, FBI. But now they're all about that. They want that, and they want them to take down Americans who are in dissent of the predominant view. So I don't know if it could be saved. I mean, I hope that Trump can get more done this time around in terms of taking on the deep state. What Michael J. Glennon calls the double government. It's not easy, but that's why they despise Trump. They do fear that he's going to expose them and he's going to possibly bring charges against them. And that's why he's supported. That's why we love Trump.
Well, there's certainly a lot of things to tear down. Maybe the most destructive is this perpetual war machine.
Yes.
And maybe all that's going to come out and the people aren't going to walk. I'm not sure what's going to happen to Tony Fauci, for example, with the Apple business. But
well, he's already been put out to pasture, I think, anyways. I mean, it's almost not worth it. Let him go off and enjoy the all the awards that his shelves are groaning under. It's aggravating, but he's no longer a threat. He's no longer in a position where he can have any kind of pull over anybody. I think he's been retired, or maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
Now he's got a no-show job at Georgetown
Oh, is that right? Okay.
with some giving some course, I think, and he's writing. He's going to release his memoirs.
Oh, lovely.
But here's a guy that's responsible for hundreds of thousands of deaths, more than that, maybe
clearly.
millions.
Clearly.
With this,
worse than Mengele, worse than any of these.
Oh, I mean, well, again, the number one article on my Substack is the Fauci and Mengele by far.
Exactly. Oh yeah, for sure.
and all you have to do, which I did, is read the Mengele biography. I'm certainly not defending Joseph Mengele.
No,
but he was the exact whipping boy of everything that was wrong and how terrible this guy, and he was. But number one, he was not the only one.
Oh no, they all took a walk. I mean, there's not even, they got a slap on the wrist at Nuremberg. I mean, this international pharma medical establishment, it's like a mob. I mean, they protect each other. They're immune from prosecution. It's all in the quote science, right? Yeah. Everyone else is anti-science. I mean, Fauci said, "I am the science."
Yeah, right.
And of course, if you believe that you can change a boy to a girl and a girl to a boy, which is not science, you're called anti-science. I mean, it's a complete inversion of reality. But it's aggravating that he's still walking around. But you know, the important thing is that those people have to be taken out of power. Let him walk off into the sunset and enjoy his loot. But as long as he's no longer threatening my life
but
and the life of my family.
You have to ask yourself, and which I have, and not many people wrote about this because what are you going to do?
Right.
All right, fine. He's walking off in the sunset. He did his damage, whatever.
Yeah.
But how does a guy like that stay around for as many years as he did, be the highest paid federal employee? You're talking about Jenna Ellis and fear. That was it. It was fear. He controlled a lot of money. Everybody knew he was an incompetent moron, but nobody spoke up. So he was able to keep it going for a long time, which, by the way, is why I really, really dislike academic MDs. And it's funny because I had a doctor's appointment a couple of days ago, and I made some comment, and boy, the doctor jumped right on it, that some of the effect, it was about skinny type 2 diabetics, of which I am. It's about 10% of type 2s are not fat. Mm-hmm. And the idea that in a lot of skinny type 2s, you can't really lower your A1C very much, no matter what you do.
Right.
You can have no carbs. You can have a bowl full of drugs. Okay. It's hardwired into your metabolism. This is known on the clinical level, but the academic level, they don't want to know. Because as far as they're concerned, via what's called population health, all type 2 diabetics are overweight Black people. Boom. End of story. So the idea, and believe me, you hear this from all kinds of clinical doctors, the people in charge don't know anything, but they have these academic credentials. They don't have to see patients because that's below them. So you have to wonder how this whole milieu with him and Collins and Rochelle, people that had elite, well, not Fauci, but Rochelle had an elite educational background.
Yes, indeed.
And boy, you don't hear much from her anymore.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't even want to talk about that, but yeah, I mean, there's another one who's.
Well, you may have seen her at the local grocery store. I don't know.
Yeah. She actually does happen to live near me. But yeah, I mean, these are people who are just enjoying their life, and it's unjust and they're rotten. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, that whole rotten thing has to be somehow purged.
Well, the only solace people like you and me and many of the listeners of the show can take is there's a higher judge.
That's
they're going
right.
to have to deal
Fauci and them will meet their maker, and they'll be judged in the afterlife. They'll be
with.
judged
And the
on
real
Judgment
Supreme
Day.
Court, yes.
Exactly. And that's all you can say. I mean, as long as they're out of harm's way now, and as long as, but yeah, at the same time, he should be fully investigated to get to the real rot of what's going on. I mean, back in the Middle Ages, they would have put him into a rack and got him to release the names of everybody that had been part of his rotten.
Well, you know what would happen if there's a congressional investigation. You know where I'm going with this. So he shows up to testify. Suddenly, he's in a wheelchair.
Yeah, there's
He's
no
got
memory.
an oxygen tank hooked up to him.
Sure.
He can't move. He could barely speak. And like all the mafia dons did, toward the end.
Well, this is what happened. This is like a lot of the Holocaust guards.
Yeah.
Too old to prosecute. This is what I said about Biden, right? The special prosecutor, Robert Hur. He's too old to charge. He's not competent. He's president of the United States. We're going to hear him deliver a speech in a few hours.
That's
But
right.
he's too.
Did anybody else react the way I did? Oh, wait a minute. He's not competent enough to handle this, but he's the president. He's got this.
Oh, yeah.
On the button,
Right. And the rest of us are into some kind of right-wing conspiracy by noticing this.
Yeah.
Right. I think that it's like they say about the election of 2020. I mean, it's like, I was asked recently, why do I think so many people think that the election was stolen? And my answer was, yeah, because anybody who was watching television on the night of that election are the people who think it was stolen because they saw it in real time. Everybody saw what happened. Everybody saw how, I think it was 5 or 6 states stopped counting at the same moment. Even that miserable skunk, Chris Wallace, when asked about it on Fox, well, people get tired. Really?
No.
And Aaron Mishkin, also of Fox, he declares Arizona for Biden when there was never any evidence that was the case. And then he was asked about it the next day. Oh, I don't know. I just made a big mistake. Thank you. Anybody who saw that and saw how that was covered.
If you watch in real time, it was obvious.
Trump yeah. Rachel Maddow was actually more honest than a lot of them. I saw her. I kept flipping around the stations, and I stayed up until like 3 a.m. watching it. She was astonished. She's like, something hinky is going on here. Then she got her story straight. But anybody who watched that rotten mess, and as you say, every state that shut down Trump was way ahead, especially Pennsylvania, where he was ahead by 300 and something like 750,000 votes. They just shut it down.
Yeah.
And then the media declares a week later that Biden had won. That's all. I mean, so yeah, that's why people think this. I mean, hello. And I think it's God willing, it's all coming home to roost.
It is. And the reason people cling to this is that, as we discussed, idolatry. All right.
Yeah.
So if you're an atheist, you still believe in something and you believe in the institutions. How can you question the great election system? How can you question the CDC or whatever, fill in the blank?
Yeah.
You're an election denier, or you're a COVID denier, or whatever the hell denier you are. And you're just supposed to accept it on face value. And it doesn't matter when Rochelle said the vaccines are 100% effective, and well, you still have to wear a mask, and well, you might get the disease, and well, you might spread it, and you got to get endless boosters, and the narrative keeps changing. And some people did not wise up. A lot did. But the CDC is now announcing that the 10th booster is available.
Then they have this weird guy who announces that he got 217 shots and he's fine. I don't know if you saw this in Germany. Very suspicious. And the left, I haven't seen them this happy in weeks.
Yeah.
Oh, they're just having this is like catnip. They love this. Anyway, Mike. So, what do you have coming up on your?
I got a couple of things on the drawing board. I've been a bit of a caregiver last several days. My wife's doing great, but I had to get away from the computer for a while.
Right.
So
Okay. Good. Well,
yeah, we've
glad
got.
everything's
And
good.
how's your book doing, by the way?
It's okay. I have another interview next week. I'm having like a public feud with Dr. E. Michael Jones. I mean, it's he I asked him if he'd like to join me and Kevin Barrett, who's a rabid hater of Israel, for a conversation.
That's
And
great publicity, though. Great publicity.
I figured I'd take two on with one at the same time. He refused to, unless I was willing to call it Israel's genocide. He says I have to have it as a category, which I'm not going to do that. I mean, first of all, nobody tells me what my category is going to be. I mean, if you don't want to come on, you don't like it, tough. It says he's dictating to me, so he doesn't come on the show.
Has Jones gotten worse?
I don't know what the hell is going on, but then he goes on and he has brother Nathaniel, right? I mean, who by the way is actually hilarious. I mean, he's way out there, and he in the middle of his interview with brother Nathaniel, he suddenly goes on a rant against me by name, and he's accusing me, and he goes, he's into Jewish privilege, and that I'm not going to ever go on with him again because it's a fruitless exercise, because he lies and because he's just dishonest. He just promotes Israel, and he called me a liar. And I then responded by first of all, I said, look, you wouldn't come on with me not because of that. You wouldn't come on because I wouldn't lie for you and say that Israel's engaged in genocide, which is a lie. And that furthermore, you talk about genocide. Have you ever talked about the Catholic and Christian, the genocide against Catholics and Christians in the Middle East, in Arab countries, in Islamic countries? Did he know that very same day, a Catholic mass was terrorists entered in and slaughtered everybody in the church in Nigeria, or was it Burkina Faso? I mean, maybe you don't care because they were black. I don't know, but I mean, it's like
that's part of it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No question. But the thing is that there's been that is a real genocide against Christians. It's been going on for time immemorial, but it's been.
The trouble is with Jones, it's not the narrative. And when you
well, that's the point. I mean, it's not the narrative of the entire Jew-hating, Christian-hating, America-hating media establishment. They won't talk about it because it doesn't fit their narrative. And then he accuses me of only bringing this up because I want to distract attention from Israel's genocide. In which case, I then responded by saying, first of all, I have a long record of talking about this. You could look at my archives. I've done many interviews, including with Colonel Sangari, who talked about it on my show, and I got a lot of views for that. And it's not something I just decided to talk about. And with regard to Israel's genocide, I'm not trying to distract attention. I'm proud of Israel. Israel is fighting an urban war with an enemy that hides behind its own people, right, and hides behind women and children. I mean, it's a very difficult situation. So I'm not trying to distract from that. So anyway, to make a long story short, we're feuding publicly on Twitter.
Now, what about Brother Nathaniel? Have you ever had him on the show?
I have not, but I actually would like to have him on. He's actually quite funny. I mean, he's weird, and he's
weird.
Funky...
He seems to be kind of an affable enough guy.
Yeah,
he's fixated on this Jew thing because he was Jewish, of course.
Right, and that's the worst kind. And I saw him on recently on a show where he was challenged by the host, and he just completely changed his stripes. So he's one of those slippery types that I used to find on the left. They're like chameleons. If they're challenged, they suddenly will take an opposite.
I have to admit, though, he's fun to watch.
He is, and he's very good at what he does, and he's hilarious. He should do comedy. But yeah, I might try to put him on my show. What the hell, right?
Yeah.
I'll ask him, what happened? You grew up Jewish. You had actually somewhat of a Jewish education. I think his
Oh, he went to Hebrew school, the whole
yeah,
nine
he
yards.
he studied Talmud. He's still in
Yeah,
touch with the Chabad movement.
yeah,
What happened? Why now? What do you like, Torquemada? You know, who himself was a former Jew who became
yeah.
the main enforcer of the Spanish Inquisition, and who was the guy that whispered into the ears of Ferdinand and Isabella to go after the Jews, right? I mean, you know, is that what you are? Anyway, so
He never, because I've watched a lot of his videos, other than describing his background, he never talks about what was the seminal event that turned it.
that did it, yeah. Well, it would be the focus of my
Yeah.
conversation with him, and so I may do that. I'm interview Ethan Ralph from Killstream, who's a very good moderator and who's a fairly middle of the road thinker and guy. I mean, he's fairly unbiased. He's having me back on to debate some Black Hebrew, I don't know, Black Israelite,
Yeah.
which might be, I don't know much about them, but I understand that they're pretty
Well, there's
radical.
a movement. In fact, Steve Allen's son was in that, believe
Really?
it or not. Yeah.
Steve Allen, you mean the original
The
late
Tonight
night
Show
guy?
guy. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. It's, yeah,
We'll see what happens.
hang
Anyway,
around
but
on that. But anyway, good to be
but the
back
book
on the
is good,
show.
and
Yeah.
let me just I might as well
And
hold it
plug
up
your
for
book, please.
The Anti-Semitic Imagination. Check it out. It's available at Amazon and at Barnes and Noble. And I'm actually starting to work on a very beginning stages of somewhat of a sequel that is going to be more historic. I'm looking at the origins of modern Christianity and modern Judaism. I've always been interested in that period, right after the death of Jesus, and what happened, how these two religions changed, how they formed, what happened, when did they fall out, and it's more of a history. I'm also working on music. I'm going back to I've been putting some ideas together in terms of melodies, in
Hmm.
terms of lyrics, in terms of songs. Somebody put the idea in my head a while back. I had as a passenger this guy who he owns a recording studio in Boston. He's a good musician from Berklee College of Music,
Yeah.
and he went into business with three other guys. The other two of them being studio musicians, and the other one being a producer. Where they got a studio and they produce songs for ad agencies. They produce jingles. They produce background for documentaries, but they also produce songs and for bands and musicians. And so, you know, if my project continues and I develop some coherent songs with guitar parts, and I'm a guitarist, I might call them up. I'm sure it'll cost me a pretty penny, but I might go in and record some music. So that's what I'm working on.
I did not know you had that talent.
Yeah. So, so I mean, I haven't been involved in it in years and even in decades. So it's kind of like going back to something that's been a part of me many years ago, and it's interesting and it's nice. It's good.
All right. Well, good. Well, good luck with that. And we
Thanks, Mike.
will see you next week.
Yes,
Same
as
bat
always,
time, same bat station.
and hopefully with more good news about Trump.
And bad news about his enemies.
Indeed. All right,
All
I'll
right.
talk to you later.
I see.
All right.